program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9.
The Planning Commission attempts to conduct its public hearings in a relatively informal manner within the constraints that we must deal with the issues before us in an orderly and businesslike fashion. We give the applicant an opportunity to speak first, then others, either for or against the proposal, are each permitted to speak once. We place no time limit on the statements, but we do request that everyone restrict their comments to the issues before us, avoid unnecessary repetition, and be prudent in the use of your time. We want to make sure that we have adequate time to deal carefully with the last items on the agenda as well as the first. The first item on our agenda tonight is a public hearing for recommendation, the North Riverfront's Neighborhood Plan 2017 update.
Good evening, Commission. You saw this at your June 5th meeting, the draft plan, and the process began. You initiated, accepted the request by the North Riverfront's Neighborhood Association to begin this work late 2015. And so we've been working with them throughout the process, and here today we are at the public hearing. So it's a great opportunity to recognize all the hard work that's gone into this document and to be ready to hopefully approve it and move it to City Council. They will look at it if you so choose to accept this and approve it via the resolution that's before you to go to Council on the 24th and 25th of this month, so in a week. So before we get into the recommendations here laid out in the executive summary, with this process, the neighborhood planning agenda that we have here at the city is to work with the neighborhood associations that request these updates. And so we have several plans. They're mostly, well, actually they're all based off the inner city neighborhoods. And so these documents lay out a 10 to 15 year time frame in terms of how the neighborhood land use primarily should be developed or redeveloped, what it should deal with housing a lot of times, neighborhood identity, crime, lots of different issues. And so we go through a process where we identify issues and try to understand the local issues that reside within that particular neighborhood, and then come up with policies, implementation strategies that would react to those issues. And a lot of these issues, this is the fourth neighborhood plan for the North Riverfront, so they're long-standing issues like aged housing. So a lot of it is, if you will, regurgitated in the plan, but trying to look at new innovative strategies that might address it in a better way. So some of the stuff is old hat that comes from the last plan in 2004, and then some of it's also new ideas and programs that, for example, the rental housing and inspection program that was passed recently by City Council, that at the time being when we brought this to you was proposed, and now I changed the language in it so that it's current, but that's a new program that should help with housing quality within the neighborhood. So that's a little bit of where we're coming from. And this plan also addresses how the private sector, if they want to develop in a neighborhood, or if you're a homeowner or a landlord, how you should develop that property too. So it's a guiding tool not only for staff to work with the development community, but also the residents that own land in a neighborhood to know what to do, what's allowed, what's not allowed. So that's kind of a primer on neighborhood planning for you. And to get into this plan here then, reflected, because it is a lengthy document, 80 plus pages, we really tried to be concise and have an executive summary that the development community, the residents, the neighborhood association can turn to and look at an at-a-glance type 2-page document. So the executive summary lays out the major goals, and also we provided a helpful map here that shows those goals, those ideas laid out within the neighborhood. So just to highlight some of this, and then we'll open it up later for questions and concerns about the actual policies. I won't go through those item by item because there's a lot. But with this map here showing one of the major changes, in 2006 there was a large rezoning or a down zone of the neighborhood. It was primarily R4, high density residential, and it was rezoned to RM, which is more of a mixed flavor of single family homes to small apartment buildings. And so that more accurately reflects what's going on in the neighborhood, but also allows opportunity for redevelopment. Along here, Madison, East Madison, and then William Street, that is an area now that the association, the steering committee that we worked with on this plan is open to for redevelopment, but it's really based off of the private sector working with the homeowners, the landowners to assemble properties to come forward with those residents and owners willing to actually sell. So it's really predicated on the owners wanting to work with the private development community to submit a project. And we know that this is a likely area as well because it's next to Phoenix Park, North Barstow redevelopment, and that there's a lot of old housing in there. In fact, housing that is probably 1850s or so, very old. So the steering committee is very open to that idea, working with developers there. A major reconstruction project along Forest Street here is planned for 2019, and that will be a great opportunity for reinvestment along that stretch. Public Works and Engineering will look at maybe some streetscape amenities, decorative lighting, those type of things that should enhance the entrance to the main bulk of the neighborhood. We also know about the proposed Veterans Tribute, and there's fundraising going for that. That's planned here in the park as well, also to connect a multi-use trail from the High Bridge down into Phoenix Park. So those are great public improvements that will take place to help the neighborhood again seek more reinvestment within the individual properties that reside there. So the Neighborhood Association and the steering committee is very excited about the possibilities for redevelopment here. And as we know, sometimes it takes a catalyst project. So it remains to be seen, but this area might actually be that place to begin that wave. So with that, those are some of the big issues there too. The steering committee also would like to address, and we've talked about it at your last meeting, the neighborhood boundaries. And so, ideally you don't want a neighborhood to be disjointed like this. This is, a unique situation, but what can we do if the Plan Commission so sees fit to combine or add together these two components of the neighborhood? So that's an issue I know that the steering committee wants to talk to you about tonight at the public hearing. So major goals are provide quality housing, increase the home ownership rates, encourage growth. I'd like to see new growth in that neighborhood. Redevelop appropriately, so working with the private property owners and the developers, enhance the parks like Forest Street, beautify Forest Street, prevent crime. This is a higher density crime area in the city, and so there's a lot of police response. We actually had probably sometimes more officers at our meetings than some of the steering committee members, so the officers really understand that this is important to provide coverage and respond to neighborhood issues there. And positive or proactive code enforcement to address any problems related to nuisances and litter. And then engaging the residents. They have a strong core leadership group in their neighborhood association, but what can we do, what can they do to enhance that? And hopefully this plan can help rally some of the residents and owners to do that. And then along lines with that is to market the place, to say that it's next to downtown, all the opportunities with Phoenix Park, the farmers market, the jobs, the walkability, the hospital, all of the benefits, despite the challenges that reside here in this neighborhood, to encourage its growth and redevelopment. So those are the 10 major goals enumerated here in the executive summary. And with that, we'll open it up to your questions of staff and then get into the public hearing.
Are there any questions? I have one, if no one else does. The area along Forest Street to Hobart Street, a lot of that is in the floodplain. How much would you have to raise it to take individual parcels out of the floodplain?
Yeah, it all depends on each lot. So if it's in the regional floodplain, 2 feet, for each property. So depending on where that elevation is, it's going to have to be 2 feet if it's in the floodplain above for new construction. So that could be a detached garage or a home. Okay,
do you know what the average elevation is right now on Forest Street on that? It would be the east side of the street?
On the east side, right.
Yeah.
It's going to vary, but I don't think I have in the map the actual, we could take a look real quick. I don't know, John, if you know.
I don't know that
Off the top, yeah, it's a good question.
Right, well, it's something that really affects the redevelopment in terms of what do you have to do to get it so that you don't need the flood insurance.
It ranges from 1 up to about 3 feet.
Okay,
Yeah, there's the river. Well, on this map in the plan, we only have the river contours there. Mm-hmm. So it's going to range, and so depending on each one, there's going to be fill that's required and maybe flood-proofing measures if there's a basement. And we note that's a big barrier in this neighborhood with having to do that for redevelopment's sake, but then also carry the insurance. And the city
Right.
does participate in the community rating system, and we're a level 7. The max is 10, I believe. And so we might be able to do a little bit more. That's noted in the plan. But that helps already some discounts for insurance, but it's not cheap. Yeah.
no, it is very expensive insurance. Okay, thank you. That's just what I wanted to know, is to kind of highlight the fact that we do have floodplain issues here. Jim?
Thank you. This handout that we got tonight that shows the North Riverfront's boundary addition, am I to understand that that's what the steering committee is asking for at this time, to include that?
And we can clarify, I just got that tonight too, although this map was forwarded to me. And what I understand, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but it not only is asking for the parkland and the riverbanks, but the area within between the blocks that represent North Barstow redevelopment. So that's what I understand is being asked.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Radebow?
No, I guess on this, continuing that, to me that area seems like the North Barstow is more downtown. Maybe some of the stuff to the east of Farwell is more appropriate, but what's your opinion?
Yeah, so based off of, land use planning, our bread and butter as planners is, the intensity of uses in downtown is much different. Neighborhood planning, at least in Eau Claire, is really looking at housing. There might be some scattered commercial, like on Water Street in the Randall Park neighborhood, but downtown is a large area. Intensities of use, you usually have a lot more parking, a lot more conflicts with that. You have bigger buildings, you have bigger office buildings, you have destination features. Not to say that 4th Street isn't a destination, but you have Phoenix Park, Farmers Market. You have a lot of traffic coming in and out of that place, and so by and large, the land use collectively is very different, Central Business District, than the neighborhood. In this case, it's unique because you have a little side part of the neighborhood that is over there that makes it a little awkward. You usually don't want that, but the neighborhood plan in 2004 did mention policy to look at how to do that, and it didn't recommend how. And so that is correct in terms of the information that was forwarded to you. It also talks about the extension of downtown, and we didn't go so far as to say that downtown should. I mean, there's a flip side to this. Should downtown actually take, and they're not going to like this, but should downtown actually encroach into their neighborhood? And that was actually a policy in the 2004 plan too. And so we chose not to go there for this update to reflect that the neighborhood, already has lost homes with the FEMA floodplain acquisition of those homes, and to try to keep it intact as best as possible. But there is policy in the comprehensive plan that does note master planning, in terms of how more development might happen from downtown. And that's reflected in this plan related to the redevelopment along East Madison and William Street. So you could look at it either way.
Commissioner Seymour?
Thank you. Would you say, what are the negatives to this neighborhood being not connected? Is it a huge negative, or what would you say about that? Yeah,
they've been in existence, and doing well. I think, again, from a land use point of view, it doesn't harm them not being connected. I think identity-wise, it's easier to say, yeah, we have these other guys too as part of our neighborhood. You're not this orphan child over, over here. So just identity-wise, I think it helps. But negativity in terms of property values and some of the things that we really look at from the planning point of view, not so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one that kind of came up as you were talking about this, the downtown plan versus the North River fronts. The other place where we have kind of this mixing is in the Randall Park neighborhood. You've got the Randall Park neighborhood, and then you have the Water Street Business District. Do they work together?
Hopefully, you would think ideally that they would coincide, but even in
Okay.
that case, there is some conflict.
There is, okay.
And there's different interests, and so oftentimes there's going to be this tension between what maybe a downtown committee wants, DECI, or the North Barstow Medical Bid Association, versus what the neighborhood association wants. So that's another thing to play into it is, with boundary changes, what's difficult at this stage is, if you would seek to amend this plan to incorporate this area, there's a lot of implications. We would need to amend the whole plan. All the maps would have to change. All the data would have to change. And so we would have to go back to the drawing board with this plan. So that's to note. But then also DECI, Downtown Incorporated, and also the bid would have to weigh in on what that means for their activities too. Not to say that they would be against it, but there's more to it than just simply changing some boundary lines. There's policies in the comprehensive plan related to downtown development. The North Barstow has a master plan. So there's a lot more going on there that, depending on what you want to do, needs a lot more time and consideration on.
Is there any kind of way to do it where there can be like a layering? Here's my example. The people that live in the apartments that run along Phoenix Park there and up towards the Livery, the tenants that live there have one point of view, and the property owners may have a different point of view, and the property owner's point of view may align more closely with what a downtown business plan is, but the tenants might want to vote as individual unit renters that would more align with the neighborhood.
Yeah, well, and that's true for any neighborhood association, is that you've got, that conflict going on in the North River fronts already with property owners, landlords, and the renters and the homeowners too. So I don't think it really makes any difference in this case.
All right, I just thought I'd bring it up.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any. Oh, do we have one? Nope. Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do you know, Mr. Noel, whether or not when these items in this letter were itemized and discussed and decided upon, was there any direct communication between the North Riverfronts Neighborhood Association and North Barstow Bid or the downtown DECI and
Right.
all those others?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
And I just got this material you're citing right here.
Okay.
I just got this before the meeting, so I just read the first page. That's all I've had a chance to review.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Would the neighborhood representative like to come forward?
Hello, I'm Bob Schroffnagel, 529 Hobart Street. I'm the treasurer of the North Riverfronts Neighborhood Association and was also on the steering committee that worked with Ned to develop the plan. So I guess we had a laundry list of issues and we had many work sessions with Ned, and we feel that for the most part, we came to a good consensus. The only kind of sticking point is this boundary issue that I guess our main thing is this is page 28 from our existing neighborhood plan. And you'll see that the association boundaries should be expanded. That's in the letter that Tammy distributed for a meeting. We're kind of going from a plan where it says we should expand the boundaries to a plan that in a nutshell says we shouldn't due to planning reasons. Obviously, we would love the boundaries to be extended, but we would, at the very least, I'd like to keep the possibility open that they could be expanded in the future. That indicated that the comprehensive plan may have to change. If we at least have something in here that we should look at this again during the next comprehensive plan update, that'd be an acceptable compromise for now, but we just don't want the door shut, tight at this point is really our major issue at the moment.
Okay, are there any, Commissioner Klinkhammer?
Thank you. My question of Mr. Noel, when the issue of the boundaries came up, was there any communication between the steering committee or the board of the North Riverside boundary, or the neighborhood association, and the commercial entities dealing with the North Barstow area?
Well, in the past, we have talked to Jeff Moting Properties. Tammy could better talk to that issue, but I know that at one point, he attended several other meetings. This was about 2013, roughly, when we were first really trying to get the boundaries changed. So we kind of been working this for quite some time. And he was interested, and his tenants were interested, and it came to a point where planning informed us that we had to basically wait till the next day for plan updates, so here we are. Yep.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Seymour?
So am I to understand that you just said that that's kind of off the table now? Is that the statement you just made?
Well, according to the language in the current draft of neighborhood plan, it feels like it is.
Okay.
Because it basically makes a statement that basically no change in boundaries is recommended. I'm not sure if that's in the first paragraph. Then the second one basically indicates that from a planning point of view, it doesn't make sense to have the neighborhood and the business improvement districts in the same boundary area, although Grand Avenue Business District and Water Street Business District are in the historic Randall Park neighborhood. And our interests are really just to try and foster community, kind of get the residents to have a voice to kind of help influence, factors that might wreck the quality of life, like crime or noise or that kind of stuff. And these are same things that business should be concerned with as well. We really do want to just make sure it's a quiet, peaceful, nice neighborhood to live in, and we really want to coexist with it a bit, but we just, we've lost a lot of houses from the flood. Forest Street Gardens area, that's all. It used to be houses when this neighborhood first formed, and many houses and many residents have left our boundaries just because of the housing that has been raised because of floods or fires or redevelopment.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Mitchell?
Thank you. I've been having quite a bit of difficulty trying to figure out what I think about this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I certainly can understand the neighborhood's interest in collecting basically the residents that lived in the area
Correct.
that you wish to expand in. But it seems to me that you would have a very different plan if you had started with that. So, for example, the neighborhood issues are, most of them, quite specific to the properties in the current
Sure.
boundaries. And so at this point, it's not just a clerical matter of changing a map or two. The issues change. And it seems like you'd have to start over with another plan.
Many of the issues
That's
like
a question.
Yeah. Yeah, so many of the issues like the blighted properties and there's properties that need to be redeveloped, those issues exist along Madison Street and along Farwell Street. And as the comprehensive plan shows, I don't have that map with me, but that's actually a future master planning area. So roughly a quarter to a third of that future master planning area is in our current boundaries, and the rest is kind of in the boomerang that we'd like to see connected. So, and that area is part of a future master planning exercise because of the fact that those properties are old, blighted, and need to be redeveloped, which is substantially our issues in our neighborhood. And a new development I'd like to point out that happened around Phoenix Park, that was a blighted area as well, and that was master planned, redeveloped, and it is what it is now. We're just hoping to get our neighborhood redeveloped as well and just kind of all work together.
Commissioner Tim
I don't have a question for Mr. Schroffnagel, but I would like to ask a question of a planner, either Mr. Tufte or Mr. Noel.
Go ahead.
I guess my question would be, we're being asked to direct staff to create the language that would incorporate the change in the boundaries in 2020 when the comprehensive plan is redrawn or revised, updated, whatever. The question I would have, it would seem to me that the North Barstow business, as well as the entire community, would be benefited by a more vital and safer neighborhood to its north. Is the movement or expansion of the boundary of the neighborhood association, would that help the business community, or are they still going to be working at cross purposes?
I think expanding the neighborhood boundary would help their identity. I don't think it changes any of the planning principles that exist in the downtown chapter of the comprehensive plan or this neighborhood plan, other than they become melded together more into a single document. And I think that's what a lot of this is more about, is the planning identity of that neighborhood, its ability to recruit more folks to be part of the neighborhood, not the planning document itself, in my mind.
We did interviews with, people, and we did interviews actually with the Phoenix Park Urbanites, their little group of, social get together and plan on issues that they have. And the woman, her and her husband, they talked about how some of the residents that live in those apartments in North Barstow they feel, there's a perception that they feel it's unsafe if they go north of Madison Street. So, there's this, this cognitive perception that we don't want to, not everybody, but this person that we talked to, felt that was unsafe up there. And that's not true, but for whatever reasons that's there. And so if that's getting at some of your questions about perception, I don't think Daryl and I can answer accurately about if that's going to change the crime levels, because we know that even with some of the properties in North Barstow, there's high crime rates with drinking and things like that. So I don't know if it's going to change crime levels, but perception of the neighborhood, maybe, in some people's mind. It depends on the person, right? So.
Okay. Don't go away. It would seem to me that if the perception of a higher crime rate or whatever other negative factors that are mentioned in the goals that will adversely impact the vitality of that neighborhood, that
right.
The more resources that you have that are focused on changing that, the better off we would be. I'm not a planner, so if that's inaccurate.
Well, and I think that's where the association is coming from.
Certainly we want to change that.
There,
certainly we want to change that perception. We want to change that perception, but we also would like to fix. There's a reason that perception exists too. We'd like to fix that as well, because there is some issues that we need to address.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Commissioner Peterson.
If I may add something, being a lifetime resident of the city, 30 years ago, the 2 blocks south of Madison Street along Barstow Street were unsafe also. So that's been cleaned up. So they've been able to work their issues out. Maybe they can help the people in the Northside Riverfront Association.
And irregardless of the boundaries, I think that's what they see too with possible redevelopment opportunities between Williams and East Madison, because that is some of the toughest stretch in terms of crime rate there. And it's just not the bars, it's residents and landlords and.
And I mean, there are issues, but I also want to point out, I've been in a neighborhood since 1992, and that neighborhood's a very different place today than it was back then. It's not in the same place to live. I mean, there's issues here and there now, but but it's not. When I moved into the neighborhood, there was issues constantly. So.
Commissioner
If I
Peterson.
may add one more thing too. The Madison Street, Birch Street, and Omaha Street neighborhood is totally different from 30, 40 years ago too. So I think it's the older housing,
Yeah.
Lower income, people have different diversions and
Yep.
and different value systems.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Granlund.
Well, I was looking at the bit of green you added as your boundary, and we are using the river frontage and the bike trail as a way of connecting a lot of things in town, and that winds its way through many districts.
Sure.
Stitching them together. I began wondering whether or not it's actually perhaps a suggestion for the Phoenix Park area that it take on as one of its imperatives to provide a greater continuity between these two portions of the neighborhood. It's not so much dictating at the boundary, but that they can share a concern to, there's a huge traffic issue between these bits. And it's, to a certain extent, a lot like saying, well, we'll just take the hill out from between the two halves of this, then you won't have to worry about the connectivity because you can be on the same side of the hill if there's no hill. But actually, it's partly the plan that's on the screen right now that identifies some of the bicycle and pedestrian crossing issues is actually just outside any of your boundaries.
Right.
And actually in the North Barstow area. I wonder if perhaps perhaps given a greater imperative to the next version of the North Barstow area that it provide greater connectivity between these portions of these neighborhoods very specifically.
That'd be helpful, because I mean, the underpass on Madison Street is useful to get to Phoenix Park, and there are, stoplights and pedestrian signals at most intersections, but there are huge challenges for, especially at rush hour, trying to cross those streets, and the big issue, of course, is by Volume 1 and the bike trail there. That's, I don't know what, we're going to be able to do about that, but that's a major issue, and that's, of course, not within our boundaries either, but it exists.
Commissioner Brenholm.
To me, it seems logical that this be merged.
Okay.
But to Commissioner Mitchell's point, if we do that at this point, there are a bunch of people that are going to be impacted by this merger that didn't get a chance to provide input into the plan. So as you suggested, as a compromise, that we leave language open that this is strongly considered in the next comprehensive plan for the city, that to me makes sense. It's my 2 cents.
Okay. And I mean, obviously, we would like to get the whole ball of wax, but if the doors at least still has a crack open, we'd be at least happy with that for tonight. Excuse me.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
Hi,
You can pull that down.
this one?
Either one.
Okay.
Whichever one.
My name is Ann Dome, and I live at 658 Galloway Street. And hearing about all this, we hear about north of Madison Street, but we still have this little section right here where I live. And some of our concerns with the boundary changes is there are houses now here in an apartment building. There are houses here that have never been part of our neighborhood. So people that I know that live there, it's like, well, I don't have any say because I don't it's not part of the boundary. And so that was part of our thought thinking with the Phoenix Park apartments and all that that's their home. And that's how we want to look at the North Riverfront. And I've been there for 27 years. It's home. So if that's going to be, the apartments, let's keep it that way. Let's keep it more of a homey and add the other homes that aren't included. And with across the street where we're going to be Hipsch, those are going to possibly be condos. That's going to be somebody's home. We want to include the people that have homes there, that's to be included in this. So that's just kind of my 2 cents.
Thank you.
For
Are there any
connecting.
questions?
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
Hi again, Tammy Schrocknagel, 529 Hobart Street.
Hold the thing down. There you go.
Yay, I'm not looking at a split Jenny. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Craig, for looking at the letter to the plan commissioners. We want to work with the city and have this happen the way it needs to happen. That's why I I took the city's map and drew the idea that right now, or shortly in the future, we adopt the public land, the parks, the waterway rights as part of the neighborhood plan. And I know we'll be working with CJ Properties when the Hepsch property is developed, and there's talk now, you might have even discussed it and decided already, to take the trail, the Galloway Street Trail, and swap land and move the trail closer to the river and have the properties be closer to Galloway Street. Those are things the neighborhood would readily enjoy working with. When you asked about has the North Barstow bid been contacted, I did. I pointed out that the bid board has been changed for about 2 years since that page was updated on the website. So I went through people and I ended up talking to Elaine Carlson, who I think talked to Mike Schatz, and she used planner-esque as far as saying business is business, residential is residential. We should keep them separate. That wasn't a meeting, that was an email correspondence back and forth between me and Elaine, and I'm sure with feedback from planning. I want to point out, and I think I brought it up the last time I was here, that in 2001, 2002, I was on the DECI board, and we took up the topic of the North Barstow bid, and I was an active representative of the North Riverfronts Neighborhood Association. It was at that time that they reinforced the fact that the North Barstow bid wanted to have first rights of refusal all the way to William Street across Madison Street, as well as some of the pockets off of Farwell, which they didn't quite get because Bernie Trentine was a crusty bugger and he wouldn't let his property be touched. So these things have been talked about, and I voted for the development of the boundaries for the North Barstow bid. Shame on me. It was, 3 weeks ago that we talked about us going out to tackle this dragon and get everybody in line. And I had a delightful conversation with Nick Meyer. He pointed out that his businesses are not represented by the North Barstow bid, nor the Neighborhood Association. It seems to lightly fall into where downtown expansion wants to go, but he said, I don't feel like I have a home. So I think we do need to take the time between this adoption in 2017 and the new group of people who are steering the comprehensive plan in 2020. So I appreciate you hearing us. We're excited to work with the folks in the Urbanites. Stu Schaefer, I'm sorry. We didn't talk to him yet. Jeff Moding actually said, yes, I would like to see our businesses, our apartments actively engaging in efforts such as trick-or-treating and Christmas decorating and things like that with the neighborhood. So with that, I guess I'd like to see us adopt the park and waterway rights, knowing we can work with CJ Properties to swap that. And then in 2020, work toward having the boundaries connected with what we have called lovingly throughout the last 19 years, the boomerang that's not connected.
A couple of comments. I think that both you and I have seen the whole North Barstow and the North Barstow downtown change dramatically over the last 25 years. And so I think the ideas that we started with 25, 30 years ago have changed because properties have been redeveloped. And so this is just kind of a natural refitting of the new uses. And who knows where we'll be 5 years from now? You know, maybe there'll be a big expansion of residential that'll make it even that much easier. Are there any questions? No? Okay.
You probed one thing, Jenny.
Yeah.
You asked about the floodplain issue with the old railroad street. And you look at the Veterans Memorial Trail proposal.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things the neighborhood is most excited about is we could see Stu and Dan taking their investor friends, raising that area all the way to the berm level and having riverside properties. And if we have a veterans trail, I don't think anyone's going to develop for property a veterans trail.
No, I'm actually thinking on the east side of the street.
Uh-huh.
You know, because there's a lot of properties on very tiny little lots. And if there was redevelopment, there'd probably be some combining of legal descriptions. But in order to make that successful, you'd really have to raise it out of the floodplain.
And that has been discussed with the Forest Street roadway project.
Okay.
And it will be discussed more in the rest of this year and into 2018 as they determine exactly where they need to go with Forest Street.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? If you'd state your name and address, I'm sorry, I forgot to say that earlier.
Yeah, no problem. Jeremy Gregert at 451 Lincoln Avenue in the 3rd Ward, actually, and we're going to be doing our neighborhood plan next, so maybe I'm getting a little bit of a warm-up in here. I just had some comments as someone who is really becoming more familiar with the neighborhood as it becomes, it's basically a part of our downtown in many ways with everything that's happening. And as a bicyclist and someone who takes transit and walks a lot, there's a lot of issues that I kind of want to go through here that I think that the plan starts to address in pretty meaningful ways. One of them is this intersection of Dewey and Galloway, which there's obviously other planning efforts that'll hopefully start to address that, but I don't think it's just an issue of a trail crossing being in not the best spot, I guess. Any direction you try to cross as a pedestrian or a driver or someone on a bike is difficult at the intersection right now. And I think we should seriously look at doing a 4-way stop sign configuration there. And I've been pushing for that for about 4 or 5 years. And I'll just use this opportunity to do that again because we really need to slow that traffic down and allow for the turning movements and the different types of users of that intersection to be able to get where they need to go safely. There's obviously other ways to address that, but I think a 4-way stop would be a good experiment that wouldn't cost much money. Another topic would be, I think we're seeing some of this division between this part of the neighborhood and this part of the neighborhood in these planning efforts and in a lot of the feeling that you get when you're in this neighborhood because of some of the boundaries of major traffic corridors, major arterials, one of them being Madison Street and the other being Farwell, where essentially there's this physical divide that our city has put upon it through routing traffic and designing those roads the way that they are designed, where they're not pedestrian and bicycle friendly to cross in any way, or particularly easy to cross even in a car. So we really need to address that comprehensively, and I think the idea that the neighborhood include this whole area as well is a way to address that and actually break down those barriers and in a way that is that involves everybody, instead of saying, oh, North Barstow will figure that out, that bid or whatever. Because I think, the Randall Park Neighborhood Association, as was mentioned, includes 2 bids within it, and it works pretty well to do that. And it also has other planning areas, including a commercial district plan for Water Street. So we've done layering before. It's just, and it tends to bring people together, and I think that could help here. On the issue of transit, there is a little bit of a concern in the sense that the plan on page 73, under policy number C1, it says continue to invest in transit for the neighborhood. It just so happens that Transit Commission last month actually reduced transit service to this portion of the neighborhood, in that Route 4 was reduced in frequency during the day significantly in order to serve Woodman's, because Altoona is able to pay for service. So the city and a lot of other factors were involved, but basically the ultimate vote was that this neighborhood has less transit service just within the last month. So this plan is already not really being followed, although it hasn't actually been passed yet. So I guess it's okay, but just something to point out. So if really the goal is to increase and improve transit service, we have some work to do. Let's just put it that way. Another item, this green line here where the trail is being proposed is great. I think we really do need to make that connection. So I want to show my support for that. It seems like it's going to align in that 2019 time period with the Forest Street reconstruction, so that whole area will be in quite a bit of flux, I guess, over that 2019 year. So I think it makes sense to plan those both out at the same time and construct them at the same time. So that's exciting to see that happening relatively soon. And I do like how the passenger rail station is mentioned as a potential. There wasn't a lot of language in the plan about how it also is a potential site for a bus transit center, and I know the city is kind of relooking at that, but it's really an opportunity that maybe should be fleshed out more in this plan, is about the bus transit center site being combined with passenger rail. And I also, just as a general planning thing, I know we've been talking a lot about how we do planning in the city, but it seems like a neighborhood plan that is on a waterfront and that has a lot of parks in it should also go to Waterways and Parks Commission. I'm not sure if that's happened or if that's the plan or anything like that, but does anyone know if that's something that happens?
Daryl or Ned, to know the answer to that question?
Waterways Parks have their own separate Waterways and Parks plan. They produce the comprehensive plan, goes through Waterways and Parks, but the neighborhood plans have not.
So it seemed like it might be a good idea, just because we seem to be always looking for more input and not just an idea for how to do that. Yeah, so those are just some random thoughts, I guess, as an outsider to the neighborhood, but I think there's a lot of, when you look at this piece of paper, there's a lot of issues, and I think that a lot of them are community-wide issues because it's a place that a lot more people are discovering, and it really is a great neighborhood, a great place for people to visit and be a part of, regardless of where you live in our city. So, okay. Yeah, thanks.
Are there any questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing no one stepping forward, I will close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move approval of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? None?
I'm not going to
Commissioner
let this go
Mitchell.
without more discussion.
Do you have I have discussion. I'm going to make an amendment. Is that all right? Before we have more discussion, we can discuss it. I would add at the end, now therefore be it further resolved that the expansion of the neighborhood boundary be considered during the next update of the city comprehensive plan.
You need a second on the amendment?
I'll second that amendment.
Okay, we have a motion and a second of an amendment on an action. So, discussion. Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Thank you. I'm going to vote against that. I think directing staff to arbitrarily change these boundaries is the wrong direction. I would support it if there was a working document from the neighborhood association, from the downtown business improvement district, from the bid, et cetera. All the commercial entities that are impacted by this neighborhood. If they could come up with a working document with, it doesn't have to be 8 or 10 or whatever, but some commonality that would coordinate in basic ways their activities, then I would say there's some justification for changing the boundaries. But just to arbitrarily change the boundaries, I don't think is the right way to do it.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. And that, Commissioner Klinkhammer, that's not what my motion intends. And my motion says that the expansion of the boundaries be considered during the next update of the comprehensive plan. And how that's done will, I suppose, be up to the neighborhood and the staff. But it doesn't say we will change the boundaries or how they ought to be changed. It just says it will come up during that process. So I agree with you.
Are there any other, Commissioner Seymour?
Just in response to that, Kathy, doesn't that go without saying that that's a potential idea anyway? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? That's something that could happen regardless of adding that sentence to that resolution, correct?
No, it's my understanding that unless we decide, we vote tonight to just plain change the boundaries, that could happen, but it won't happen unless it comes up then. It's my understanding. Daryl?
I'd agree. This specifically says this will be brought up, this will be discussed. And if it isn't in this document, unless somebody brings it up and a future plan commission or future council says, hey, we need to talk about this, it isn't going to go anywhere. So
Then I'm in.
Commissioner Peterson.
I agree with Ms. Mitchell's amendment too, in that if we don't put a spotlight on it, it's going to come up it could come up at the end of the comprehensive plan, just like it's coming up at the end of this neighborhood plan, where it should really be in the forefront. So by adding that, it should be considered in the next comprehensive plan. It does put a spotlight on it. It doesn't dictate that it'll be done, but at least you look at it, which I think is important.
Any other comments? If not, I'll call the question on the amendment first. All those in favor of adding that amendment to the resolution? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the amendment carries. Thank you, David. Any other discussion on the resolution itself? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 1 is done for at least a little while. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing for recommendation rezoning from I-2 to R1A, 1302 115th Street.
this is the property. It's located east of National Presto's site off 115th Street. And the area, although it got dark, it's mostly vacant land surrounding the site. There are some rural homes or village homes and a storage building immediately to the north. It's a 9-acre site. Applicant intends to build a home on it. The comprehensive plan does identify the areas being appropriate for low-density residential development. There's no sewer and water available to the site, and therefore the proposed R1A zoning for the property is consistent with areas not having city sewer and water, and we've recommended approval.
Kathy?
Thank you. Is there access off of
There,
12th Avenue or 115th Street?
yes, the property does have a access at that corner, yes.
Are there any other questions for Daryl? I have one. The property that's directly to the west of this property, is that where the monitoring wells are from the old EPA cleanup site?
This site has monitoring wells. I'm not sure where they are located. I think they are actually further to the west.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Daryl? I don't see any at the moment. Would the applicant like to come forward? Please state your name and address.
Madam Chairman, I'm Terry Moulton. I reside in the town of Seymour at 980 118th Street. This 9-acre piece is a part of a 49-acre parcel that I purchased in 1999. The other 40 acres is in the village of Lake Hallie, and I'm looking at the future possibility of building a home there, a single-family residence. Currently, it's heavy industrial, zoned heavy industrial, which wouldn't allow that, so that's basically it.
Are there any questions for the applicant? I don't see any, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Okay, I don't see anyone coming forward. We'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move approval.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 3 on our agenda for recommendation, public hearing, rezoning from TR 1A to C3P, site plan for Mills Fleet Farm.
This is the property. It's located the southeast quadrant of I-94 and Highway 93. There's commercial zoning to the south and across the highway to the west. There are residential lots immediately to the east. Again, an aerial photo of the site showing the commercial businesses to the southeast. Vacant land and then residential lots as you head to the south. This is the general development plan for the property. It shows the large main building on the largest lot 1, a relocation of the Old Town Hall Road or frontage road, the creation of 2 or more lots, one having a convenience store car wash, the other being for future development, and then an outlot for a drainage pond. The moving of the frontage road then also involves a vacating of the existing roadway, which is next to Highway 93, and we've highlighted the vacated portion of, the proposed vacated portion of Old Town Hall Road in blue. This is then the actual site plan for the project, showing the Fleet Farm building on the main lot. It's parking to the west. The convenience store car wash on the lot 2 across the relocated Old Town Hall Road, or frontage road as we'll call it, a proposed lot immediately to the north, stormwater pond to the south. You'll note there's a substantial grade separating this site from the proposed location of the Fleet Farm building. These are building elevations for the main building on the property. It does include their silo. And these are building elevations for the car wash convenience store, which will be located across the street to the west. And finally, running out of room to put all these. These are some of the elevations of the storage yard area. It will have a three-sided structure. They will enclose a portion of that, not only for storage, but also for screening. And I want to make sure you understand where those are. They're basically here and here. And I understand there's then fencing for the rest of the storage yard area. Now the main building's a 218,628 square foot Fleet Farm. Across the road is a 4,905 square foot convenience store car wash. There's projects narratives also provided by applicant in your packet that further explain this project. In terms of the rezoning, the comprehensive plan does identify this site as being appropriate for commercial development. Again, there are existing commercial developments to the south and across the road to the west. There are residents to the east, primarily southeast, but again, there's a substantial 30 to 50 foot grade change between those properties. The narrative provided by applicant talks about this R3 zoning to the east of this site. That is not part of this application at this time, and that narrative needs to be corrected as part of this application. In terms of the general development plan, it then shows footprints for two of the buildings, buildable area for the third building or lot, and then this would be an outlot for drainage. It shows the 50-foot setbacks along the state right-of-way, 20-foot setbacks along the relocated Old Town Hall Road, 25-foot setback along the west property line. Again, the general development plan notes the vacating of Old Town Hall Road, and with consideration of this general development plan, the Plan Commission would be recommending that street vacation. The general development plan then also shows the new alignment of Old Town Hall Road. So again, with the consideration of this general development plan, you're considering recommending the new alignment or the dedication of that right-of-way. In terms of the site plan, the main building includes 153,055 square foot of retail space that has a required parking of 613 stalls. They're showing a 583 stall parking lot with 90 more stalls they can add to the south of the building. Applicant is actually then requesting Plan Commission to reduce its parking requirement based on that assumption, when the Plan Commission is allowed to do that under provisions of the zoning code. And we do believe that's a reasonable approach to a parking situation such as this, when they have such a large parking lot. Why put in all that pavement, as long as they're guaranteeing to us we'll put in that added 90 stalls if it's needed in the future. In terms of the car wash across the street, it has 1,000 square foot of retail space. That is a parking requirement of 4 stalls. They have 5 stalls on site for that. Most of the parking for a convenience store occurs under the canopy as they're putting their gas on. They do need to indicate the vehicle stacking for the car wash. It appears there's plenty of room to the west or back of the site to do that. And we're recommending a revised site plan that actually shows it can fit on the site. The bike parking requirement for the main building is 56 stalls. We note in the report the provisions of code that allows the Plan Commission to reduce that by 50% or 28 bike park stalls. And we do believe that's a reasonable bike parking for this large building at this type of a location. The applicant narrative did suggest they wanted further exemptions, and we note those exemptions for bike parking in the report. We would not agree with that request. We do believe they have plenty of room to place 28 bike parking stalls next to the main building. The bike parking requirement for the convenience store gas station across the road is 4 stalls. The main access into the buildings comes off the relocated Old Town Hall Road, here and here. They also show an access to the north as their loading dock access to the back of the building. Those access drives are not noted in terms of width. Access drives are restricted to 30 foot in width or narrower unless approved by the Plan Commission. Car wash also has 2 access drives directly onto the relocated frontage road. They do not show any type of pedestrian access to both of these buildings. We are recommending conditions that would have them link the main sidewalk in front of this building to the relocated Old Town Hall Road, also providing a pedestrian link from the main entrance into the convenience store, car wash, to Old Town Hall Road. They note fire hydrant locations not only on the street but also out in front of the building, connection to the building for those sprinklers, also on the front side of the building. We do need fire department review of those locations and also site access. They have a very general landscape plan noting trees along Old Town Hall Road. They need to provide street trees along Old Town Hall Road and Highway 93. They need to provide shade trees within all those traffic control islands shown in their main parking lot. Some of these parking bays are in excess of 20 stalls, in which case they have to provide another one in the middle of 7 of these and provide shade trees within those also as per landscape manual standards. They should look at some foundation plantings to the front of the building, also particularly in this area along the storage yard to help break up the appearance of that storage yard. They do show a screen dumpster for the convenience store and car wash. Their dumpster location for the main building is within their storage yard area. The building materials are described within the attached narrative and are illustrated with the building elevations. They did provide a sign package with the application. They will need to meet C3 district standards. Basically, it shows too many wall signs and their pole sign is too tall. So they'll need to make modifications to that, and we'll deal with that in terms of reviewing that with permits. We did attach the city engineer's report. Looks at the provision of city services to the site. We have recommended approval of the zoning for the property, which does include the general development plan with conditions. 1, revise the project narrative to eliminate all references to the future residential project. Number 2, with its review of this general development plan, the Plan Commission is recommending the street vacation. Number 3, with its review of this general development plan, the Plan Commission is approving the relocation or dedication of the new alignment for Old Town Hall Road. And then compliance with conditions in the city engineer's report. Those conditions require the completion of a traffic impact analysis for this project, that they dedicate the new alignment for Lorch and Old Town Hall Road, that they enter into the development agreement for the construction of that new street with utilities, that they enter into the development agreement for the funding of any traffic capacity improvements that are identified by the traffic impact analysis, that they provide calculations for stormwater runoff, and that they provide WSDOT the opportunity to review this plan. Engineering also recommended the similar conditions with the site plan for this project. We did provide a letter that recommends conditions for the site plan. That letter is in your packet. It states, provide 6 copies, a revised site plan that shows the stacking of vehicles for the car wash, that provides 28 stalls for the main building for bike parking, 4 stalls for the car wash convenience stores, that they note the width of those access drives, that they provide the pedestrian links out to the main road, that they revise the landscape plan as we note within our report, that they provide a detailed screening plan for the storage yard, and that they note an exterior lighting plan for this project. With the approval of this site plan, the Plan Commission is then allowing the reduction in the parking, and that those 90 stalls in the south end only need to be provided if warranted. The fire department still needs to review yard hydrant locations, the building connection location for sprinklers and site access. that they comply with the recommendations in the city engineer's report. They'll need to finalize the CSM for this project, and that they again revise their project narrative to be consistent with the conditions in this letter. And with that, I'd answer any questions.
Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Mr. Tufti, in the letter with the conditions, how do we deal with the signing issue?
Signs we will review with permit. We
So
put it in.
doesn't have to be as part of the condition?
No, we could add, let me make sure here. Yeah, it doesn't need to be part, it could be, but it doesn't need to be. It's an ordinance standard. We put it in the report to advise applicant to be aware of. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. In the applicant's materials, I thought they said that they had already done a traffic impact analysis and had sent it in. And if so, are there any recommendations that come from that?
Not yet. There has been one that's been submitted. We've reviewed it with the DOT, and we've reviewed it back with the consultant that submitted it, and started working out some of the details that may come from it, but there's still some revisions to be done to it before we can come with definitive conclusions. So it's in works, but we're not there yet.
Any other questions for Daryl? Commissioner Mitchell.
I have one more. How many parking stalls do they need?
But
I'm sorry, how many do they need?
by ordinance standards, they're required 613. They are proposing 583 with the condition they'll add 90 more or whatever's needed, if needed in the future. And that's reasonable in our minds.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is the applicant here?
Good evening, Disa Wallstrand with Ayers Associates here on behalf of Commonweal Development. Most important, I would suggest we accept the conditions that were listed by staff. Point out that the 40-foot driveways, we're not going to look for those. The 30-foot driveways will suffice based on the current layout, so not asking the commission to consider that change in driveways. But otherwise, we will comply with the conditions and work with staff on those. Can I help with questions?
Are there any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. If you'd like to make comments, please come forward one at a time. Please state your name and address and pull the thing down so we can see you.
I'm Judith Gray. I live at 5115 Shelamy Drive. Something I didn't see addressed is the intersection where Fryedeck Road meets Lorch Avenue. I live out here. I live way out here. And there's probably 30 or 40 homes out in this area beyond Shelamy Drive. I don't know how many homes there are, 30 or 40 or more. And we all use this intersection to get in and out of here. And I know this is still part of the town of Washington, but I just was wondering how that is going to be, that intersection will be addressed.
That is a good question. The traffic engineer would like to help answer it.
Okay.
Well, we know that it's a bad intersection.
Mm-hmm.
And we're fairly limited on, let's use this, we're fairly limited on what we can do to the south because of the convenience store here. Part of the reason for vacating Old Town Hall Road and moving it to the east is to at least get a little bit more separation.
Mm-hmm.
There probably will be still some stacking issues here. One of the things that we're talking about in the design details is to put a cul-de-sac here with a center island so that if cars come up and cannot immediately make that left turn, they'll be able to at least get into the quay, get around that way. So between moving the road and the cul-de-sac, it won't make the south leg perfect, but it will improve it. But those are still preliminary discussions about how that might work.
Okay. I have a question. On Friedeck Road, is there another way out onto 93 besides using this intersection for the people that live back there?
There is, but it's quite inconvenient, actually. It goes over by,
Yeah, in
it
general.
goes way over here.
Well, this is the development. This is
Yeah, where is it?
Lorch, and Friedeck comes along by PowerTech, well, TV18, PowerTech, Swim Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Comes down by White Auto Glass, and then, I'm not sure what this road is, but I'm believing you live in this subdivision.
Yeah, I live over here.
And you would come down here, and then you get to what would be a V, and if you turn left, there's another entrance out to 93.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
uncontrolled. It
Yeah.
doesn't have the stoplight that there is at Lorch.
Oh, okay, which
But
makes
you
a
can
big
get down
difference if
there
you're going
and
right.
do a right
Right.
turn for these.
Okay,
Right, yeah.
Okay.
It just makes it
very
inconvenient.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other comment I just wanted to make is that there is quite a, quite heavily used bike path out there as well. And so, with the amount of cars that are going to be through there, I'm just a little concerned about the safety.
Can you show me on the map where the bike trail goes? I know, I can see it in my head
The bike
further
trail,
south of there, but.
It's right along 93. Where is that? Yeah,
It might even show up on this aerial.
yeah.
Let's zoom in as far as we can. And you can see the little gray
Okay.
line coming along.
Yeah.
The trail where it crosses the intersection will be controlled by the stoplights, like they are the cross on Claremont.
Okay,
So there will be some control there. There is a plan to link the trail into, along the north side of Lorch, to bring that back to this road as well with a short stop.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Before you go, let me make sure that there aren't any other questions for you. Are there any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
Hello, Jeremy Gregert, 451 Lincoln Avenue. Wanted to brought the Chippewa Valley bike map so you can kind of see how this project fits into the context of where people are trying to get to on bicycles. And it shows a bit more clearly than the other maps where the trail is, the green line going south on 93. And this is where the proposed development is. So we have, so the bike map is not an official city document or anything. It's something that citizens put together with the Regional Planning Commission. And the blue lines are those roads that are most bike friendly. They're more comfortable to ride on, and the orange are the kind of medium comfort level, and this little dashed red is where the
Danger zone?
yeah, it's like a connection that you still need to make in order to get where you need to go, but it's something you should use a lot of caution on. There's often a lot of traffic. So we have kind of a little bit of a warning at that intersection that the previous speaker just brought up, is that intersection is actually problematic already, let alone what's going to happen with what's being proposed. But we, like I see this project changing this area somewhat fundamentally for bicycling. You can see the Highway 53 connection over here. You cannot get through on a bicycle if you are going from Highway 53 to the mall area or trying to reach the city of Eau Claire. You have to take Old Town Hall Road and then loop through here to get on the trail and take that in. And this project is going to add a lot of traffic to that area, and I'm a bit surprised that we're not hearing much about how that connection is going to be retained as an escape route for people biking, or an entrance to our city for people biking if they live out in the country. This could really make that not particularly viable anymore, and we're losing our routes in and out of the city increasingly because of these large developments. So I guess I did email the city engineer and the transportation engineer for for the city last night about the specifics of some of these roads that are going to be built, like the realignment of this old Town Hall Road, and I didn't get an answer yet. There's none of these maps show anything of any detail, which is kind of frightening. And in fact, the site plan is not even close to being done, and we've been hearing about revisions that are going to happen or that the city's asking for. This is probably as close as we can get, but there's no indication here that the city's even going to put in sidewalks, or there was a mention just now that was new information that there was going to be a bike trail connection from Highway 93 to at least the old Town Hall Road, but I haven't heard anything about an actual like bike lane or a trail along this old Town Hall Road around here where all this truck traffic is going to be going through, or these cars. And then there's a residential development that may be coming later where there's going to be people that are going to want to walk and bike in the immediate area. So I'd really love to see some actual planning work done. There was an indication in the documents that there were no plans for bike lanes at the very least, because the 42-foot wide roadway for Old Town Hall Road it says it'll have a twiddle lane, which is about a 16 or 18-foot center turn lane. I'm not sure if that's an official term, but twiddle is the word used. It's basically a center turn lane, and that'll take up. So between the 12-foot car lanes and that center turn lane, you don't have room for bike lanes. So it's a little bit. So that's something that we can change because we have basically a clean slate here. So I'm hoping that the Plan Commission can give the directive that we put bike lanes, or at least we use the right-of-way, the 66-foot wide right-of-way that is being proposed by the city, to put in a trail all along this whole thing, at least on one side, so people can ride bikes through this area still. And maybe 66 feet for the city right-of-way is not enough, and we need more than that in order to accomplish that. But it's a completely clean slate here where we can negotiate with the developer to make anything we want happen here. So we should use the leverage that we may have to do that. One idea to help alleviate some of the connectivity issues for people biking along this corridor that I brought up right here, where we really need this road to be able to connect from this whole part of town over and into the city, is to actually connect a little bike trail using the 50 feet required right-of-way between I-94 and the development, is to bring a trail connection that goes right here from that corner of the property over to the trail, so you can actually avoid this whole intersection. This, if it's a popular business, which I think the intent is, it's going to be difficult to get through for people walking and biking. So having a connection right here would help take the pressure off that and give people another option, and also save people time. It'd be like a shortcut. So that's something else to consider, that since we have a completely clean slate here, and this commission has the power to make such recommendations, that would be one connection I would recommend, and in addition to requiring a trail or bike lanes through the entirety of Old Town Hall Road. The other consideration that wasn't mentioned is transit. We don't have transit service in this area. It gets up to about a mile away over on Gulf Road. But there's so much development in this area, especially on the other end of Lorch Avenue, where you have Action City and the Metropolis and Florian Gardens and some other places, including public facilities like the Expo Center and the county park. We have a situation where this might be the tipping point for transit. I don't know, but at some point we're going to need transit out here. So what is the site plan requiring of the developer to accommodate transit in terms of where that bus route would go, so it would actually be, so the road is actually aligned so with transit-oriented development, so that it actually makes sense to bring service if we ever could afford to bring it down there. Or maybe it's something where the bus stop would be on the road and not in the site plan.
I was going to say, that's kind of outside of the provisions of what we're looking at here, but those are good ideas, that we don't have bus service on that end.
Yeah, I think it's completely within the boundaries of this discussion because it was addressed in the documents to a certain, in terms of the distance from transit service. And I do believe we consider bus stops within site plans sometimes, but
Especially if it's residential.
yeah, and I mean this is a major employer here and things like that too. So there's a lot of things to consider in terms of transit service that I wanted to bring up. And just as if some may be skeptical about how much people would bike to a fleet farm, just as a little story here, I used to go to one when I was like, and this is in the 90s when I was like in junior high, and I used to bike like 15 miles to go to a movie theater that was across the street from a fleet farm. So I would get my candy, at the fleet farm, and I'd sneak it in. But so on a bicycle, there'll be kids who are maybe going to Action City, or maybe they're going to the Expo Center or things like that, and they're on the bike trail. They're going to want to visit the fleet farm for other reasons than buying like large items or things like that.
Okay.
And I bought my lawnmower at the fleet farm in Menominee when I lived there, and I rode my bike and put it in my bike trailer. So there's going to be people with bike trailers showing up potentially. So there's a lot of different potential drivers of traffic and different types of traffic that people might not think about. So just wanted to let you know we exist out there. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the speaker? I don't see any. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move approval with staff recommendation.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I don't see any. We'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is a rezoning from C2P to R3P, a community-based residential facility, assisted living and memory care.
This project's located on the north side of Stonewood Drive, east of Mill Run Road, south of State Highway 312. There is residential zoning across Stonewood to the south. There's an aerial photo of the property, this condominium project that has approval to expand. The Beehive, which is also assisted living memory care, has approval for a project here. And this project's located then across the road from that facility to the north. This is the general development plan for the property. Shows the layout of the building on the site, along with parking for employees and visitors. It's a stormwater pond, conceptually shown. And the building elevation depicting a residential appearance to a long building that is single story. Also with this application are CBRF requests for exceptions to allow a capacity for 60 persons and an exception to the 2,500 foot requirement of state law. There is also a narrative in your packet provided by applicant explaining this facility. It's a 42,000 square foot CBRF with 60 total beds. 40 are for assisted living and 20 are for memory care. In terms of the zoning, the comprehensive plan designates this site as being appropriate for commercial development. We place in your report a statement on the text of the comprehensive plan that allows the city to consider residential zoning for these types of locations based on a list of criteria. We would note Stonewood Drive is a short cul-de-sac with residential projects already approved on the south side of the street, and we do believe this project will create an attractive residential environment that will have less of a traffic impact on adjacent residential uses, will have less of an impact on those uses also than, say, commercial development on the north side of the street. The general development plan notes that access to this facility will be off of Stonewood. It does provide the 50-foot setback for the building off of the state highway. It notes 20-foot setbacks from the other roadways. The narrative provided by applicant notes that most persons that live at this facility do not drive, and the parking needs are basically for visitors and staff, which will be a maximum of 12 folks. This is a general development plan, meaning site plans will require plan commission review at some future date if council approves this rezoning, and they'll need to be consistent with this plan. In terms of the CBRF requests for exceptions, Wisconsin statutes allows CBRFs within a community if they are 16 units or smaller in multifamily areas. This is a 60-unit facility, so they're asking for an exception. And if they're not within 2,500 feet of an existing CBRF, and this is within 2,500 feet of that existing CBRF for the Beehive project right across the road. We place in the report the provisions providing the exception, the criteria that the Plan Commission should consider. We would note that for this request, it proposes a 60-unit assisted living and memory care facility. These normally have very little traffic impact, and we do believe this use will be compatible with existing and planned residential uses across the road to the south. There is adequate city services provided to this site, and we did attach the city engineer's report pertaining to the availability of city services. We've recommended approval of the rezoning and the CBRF with conditions. Final site plans consistent with this general development plan will require plan commission approval and compliance with the recommendations in the city engineer's report, which address drainage for the facility and requires the developer to enter into a development agreement pertaining to paratransit services to the facility. We did receive a letter in opposition to this request, and we attached it to your report. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions, Commissioner Peterson?
Daryl, I know it's state statute, but do you know the philosophy behind the 2,500-foot spacing limitation?
CBRFs can be a wide range of facilities. These are normally the more quieter, non-impactful type of CBRFs. They can be early release for prisoners, folks with addiction issues, things like that, and they normally raise more of a concern when they're located within a neighborhood. And the idea of the 2,500-foot rule is to limit the concentration of facilities within a given area within a community.
With the old Sacred Heart Hospital on the top of the hill, the North Hill, that would be a CBRF or not, community-based?
I'd have to check. There's a whole range of definitions of these facilities, some that are and fall under the CBRF exceptions and some that do not.
Okay, thank you.
I'd have to check with that. Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Daryl? I don't see any. Thank you. Is the applicant here?
Good evening. I'm Tim Wren with Consolidated Construction. I'm representing Commercial Horizons today, the developer of the project. I just want to kind of give you a little bit of history before we get into some of the things. I want to kind of introduce some of our teammates. We have Jason Lindeman from Care Partners, who will be the operator, Ken Kozakowski, our architect, and Mark Erickson from Kramer Land Design. So if there's any questions that are far too technical, I'm going to defer to those guys. We've been looking at sites in West Eau Claire since I think nearly January. And we've been in the city a couple of times. Struck out on a few sites. We came across this site. So we've been working with them to find a site that we thought would be a good fit for this use. I guess, I can kind of talk about a few of the things. I completely agree with what Mr. Tufte said about the exception rule. We build in 15 states, and it's a pretty common thing because of that statute. So it's very common that, we ask for special exemptions and rezoning because it's actually called community living arrangement, not CBRF. It's kind of a broad gray area. So when you're defining it, it kind of takes into account lots of different kinds of uses.
Are there any questions for the applicant? I have one. What is the average size of an assisted living memory care? How many units are there typically in other developments?
I don't know if there's an average size, but...
Is 60 big?
No, not really. It's probably medium size.
Okay, and this is single story?
Single story wood frame construction. It is 60 units, and the rendering that we've done so far looks really long and linear, but I want you to understand that it's really two communities in one. It's on one side we've got the memory care, and on the other side we have the assisted living. So it's really two communities in one, and that's how it's really represented. Yeah.
In the memory care area, does it have proper alarm systems in case someone decides to leave?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything that we do is dictated by the Department of Health Services, so it's very, very,
okay.
They're very, very restrictive. Yeah.
I'm just thinking how close that is to the highway.
Well, for elopement issues, and we're going to be fenced in, and we're going to have all that in place, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? I don't see any.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
I just fill out a yellow sheet. Do I need to fill out a yellow
Yep.
sheet to ask?
Are we out of them?
No, I just didn't.
Okay. Yes, fill it out and give it to Ryan, but you can speak first.
Great, yeah, that's fine.
Mine will be fairly quick, I think.
Of course.
Hi, I'm Alana Strawinski. I'm at 4110 John Hart Place. I just want to voice concern or ask for clarity regarding the type of residents that plan to be residing here. My husband and I bought our home on Mill Run Road about 4 years ago. The main appeal of the area, even though it was a struggling development at the time, was the security of the neighborhood, the safety to raise a family. I don't know if anyone's noticed recently there's been new homes popping up in the development, which is fantastic. Those are mostly couples around my age, maybe a little older, all with homes and families looking to raise young children. So I just have some concern regarding the proximity to those neighborhoods, depending on the type of applicant that's going to be living in that housing.
And I think that would be a question that would probably be best addressed by one of the people who's going to be working there.
Okay.
So we'll ask them to come back forward, okay?
Jason Lindeman, 4034 Stonegate Drive, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I'm the owner-operator of Care Partners Assisted Living. We have 47 locations throughout the state of Wisconsin. We have 2 over on Birch Street and some over in Altoona. The primary residents that live there are the frail elderly, and then the memory impairment is a delayed egress lockdown unit. So nothing that anybody would have to worry about in the neighborhood.
Okay, those are of no concern. I did read some sort of documentation regarding Statute 50, I believe it was, that addressed adults in rehabilitation for alcohol and drug services. Any included in that?
None in our program services. So.
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
Yes. Sorry about that. Thank you. My name is Tim Santine. I live at 4023 Mill Run Road, neighbors. And actually, she addressed one of my questions. Again, it was just a concern with what type of resident would be actually living at the facility, and it's read more than I really cared to from Wisconsin state statutes, and well, I'm glad to have gotten that answer. Because again, it's all young families or many young children, and when you hear someone toss around that it could be like a halfway house for recovering addicts and stuff, that gets, I can tell you, that would make a lot of people pretty up in arms. But I guess the other question I had was actually in reference to the water flow. When this property gets developed, any runoff issues where there's a small, it's not on the map here, well, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a small little lake and pond, in the neighborhood. I don't know how old this picture is, but this is a lake. It's really hard to tell on the picture. It just looks like empty forest lot, but that's just a lake. And it floods. This is like, we're kind of like the runoff for the whole west side of town here. And there's a dry creek bed that's, well, not dry now because of all the rain that's come in, that fills this up, and there's backflow over here. And most of June, this whole portion of the park was underwater. This is a second or third time it's happened. Originally, when the city developed all of this land, this neighborhood was going to be built in 2 phases, phase 1 over here, phase 2 over here. And obviously, phase 2 never happened after the original developer didn't complete the project. The reason I bring it up is part of phase 2 for this whole West Ridge neighborhood development plan was to install essentially like an overflow valve on the north end of this lake that ultimately would go under the north crossing and somewhere, I believe, over here, drain into this drainage on the Menards property that ultimately leads to Sherman Creek. In 2015, we were working with the city to try and get that done because it never got done because the whole half of the park was underwater. And with any new development that happens, in the area there, I'm just kind of curious if, this map here that the gentleman showed had the stormwater collection basin there, but I feel a couple of my neighbors have asked, what's going to happen when there's more development here, there's more runoff, it'll feed the pond, it'll feed all this and flood this park that's kind of, the city's mowing it now, which is great, but it's very underdeveloped and, sometimes half underwater, so that was my question.
And we'll ask the traffic engineer to come up and he can tell us.
Well, in this case, I'll be wearing my stormwater hat.
Oh, okay, different hat.
A little history on what this is. The gentleman's correct in that there were multiple phases to this development. The pond that he's referring to is right here. And actually, the stormwater facility, that is part of it. The little arm that comes back towards Mill Run Road is part of it. And the lower park area is actually part of the volume for peak rate runoff control. So in full design, with full development, we would expect that low area in the back to flood during rain events. There is a active developer working on this area that the longer range plan, had that gone forward at the time before they stopped, did have an overflow route that actually came back along the south side of 312 across Kane Road and then over to Sherman Creek on the south side of Kane Road. This development at that time was planned to come back into that area. Now, the way that it is developed with the different parcels along here and where this is, it's going to be very difficult for them to get back into here. Now, the older scheme, all this field came to a low area here. In fact, some areas south of 94 came through here. Once this low area filled up back in when it was being farmed, it spilled over and into the 312 culverts or ditch and then got culverted over and through the Menards site.
Okay.
And so the current thinking now for this development is that we'll try to direct it towards those culverts instead of back to this pond because we recognize the water's building up. Now, it also provides us an opportunity because the development comes all the way to here, that there might be a way to do some of the piping from the road that came to the pond to do a cross connect to create an overflow on an interim basis to help alleviate that problem.
Okay,
So
sounds good.
it's something we're
So it's
aware of,
it's
something we're
something
trying
you've
to
thought
resolve.
about. Okay, that's important.
And this should not exacerbate that.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
Hello, good evening. Joe Miller, 4643 Old Wells Road, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I represent Investment Realty and Westridge Village. To the south of this parcel, there's approximately 16 condos there. We own 10 of those 16 there. I would just like to say that we are in support of this development. The two parcels that are in reference here, they've been vacant for many, many years. Not much interest in them. So we're looking at it as if this is a really good thing for the area. With Quick Trip going in to the west, this potentially going in here, it's just going to add with further development going on down Highway 312 with it. We also like the idea that with the type of, with the memory care going in, it's low traffic going through versus like a retail or a gas station or a restaurant or something like that, which is good for Stonewood Drive because there's a cul-de-sac there. And it's, you know, coming in off of 312 on the Stonewood, having less traffic is better than more traffic on it. So again, we'd just like to say that we're in support of this.
Thank you. Wait, there's a question for you, Commissioner Mitchell.
Do you own this parcel?
We do.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
Good evening. My name is Dan Peckel, and I'm at 3355 Mayo Street in Eau Claire. It was about 9 months ago I was here before the commission on behalf of Beehive Homes of Eau Claire. On this plan here, you'll see we are right here. So when I came and ultimately obtained approval here, it was for a 20-unit CBRF with an allowance for building a second one in the near future, perhaps 1 to 2 years. Now, I'm assuming the commission perhaps got the letter I authored about a week ago, so if you have read that, I don't want to rehash everything in respect to your time. I'll make a few points here. One that's concerning is, at what point were the rules that were made for a reason valid or should be broken? There's two of them here, and we're not talking minor tweaks. One of them is the 16 residents. We're talking almost 4 times that in this case to be a 60-unit CBRF. From the ones that are in the area, comment was made, it was maybe medium size. A lot of them are the smaller footprint that Beehive Homes is known for that I'll be putting in. And so 60 seems to be on the higher end versus medium. And certainly there are the larger ones, but I don't think that's the exception here. So when we came in with this concept to the neighborhood, and we did a lot of searching as well for this, and what made sense to us to put in these smaller units was the single home families that were in the area, the condo units, and just the community makeup made a lot of sense for the smaller footprint CBRF that we have. And this is assisted living and memory care as well. But the points I'm making here isn't purely because, you know, this is competition coming and so forth. I think you hopefully were able to read that through the letter, that there's a lot of valid concerns. One of the other things is the 2,500 feet that is maybe just as important as a 16-person unit. As you can see from the map here, we're not talking 2,500 feet here. We're not talking 1,000 feet. We're talking probably 100 feet, 150 feet, depending on where you measure from. So right here is, you know, the first under construction right now CBRF of for Beehive Homes of Eau Claire, with a future extension here that was already approved. We're talking about a narrow cul-de-sac here and then building right here. So again, it's fairly alarming to me that this would be considered when we're talking 2,500 feet to basically you get any closer and these should be adjoining buildings is basically what it seems like. What was not mentioned earlier actually is, so if you count the CBRF that I'm doing is either 1 or 2 with a future extension, but there's also the milestone here too that, again, was not mentioned. That's also within 2,500 feet. We got that exception being 1,300 plus feet away. This is certainly closer than that, and listen, a stone's throw from our newest development. So again, those are rules that are put in place for a reason. But what made a lot of sense here just maybe 10 minutes ago was the point that Mr. Tufte made for me, is that the CBRF rule for that 2,500 feet, that's my understanding as well as what he had mentioned, and that's to limit the concentration of CBRFs, which I might add, these are all similar use. That was brought up earlier, is that's a broad umbrella. Well, please consider that basically the Milestone, the building 1 and 2 of Beehive, and this would all be assisted living memory care. So there's not a diversity there. So it really plays to the concentration. And if it's meant to be, in his words, limited concentration, we have a big problem here, I think, due to that, and being of similar use. As far as changing the complexion of the neighborhood, again, I hit on that a little bit as far as the single-family homes and so forth. This is a massive complex, right along the highway. That's not going to be exactly what we envisioned 9 months ago, where we're going to have the smaller units, the more family-like thing. I will say that there is definitely a need for CBRFs for assisted living and memory care. I think all of us in the room can recognize that. Is this the right place to put that? Is there a justification to change the current zoning, which I think would be more beneficial to the neighborhood, of maybe a retail setting, of, I believe it's called a neighborhood shopping district. So what compelling reason would there be to change that when that would benefit, I believe, the residents, travelers, others more? Furthermore, with there being already a high concentration of CBRF residents, that would be something that would be in walking distance for these folks, for the people that visit them, for the residents themselves, for the staff members on break time and so forth. So you'd have a good community right there to support what was intended for this neighborhood shopping district, so that I don't want lost either. Bringing upon this Care Partners here, that would be a concentration of probably 150 CBRF residents, again, of similar use, in a one block, area of space. So again, the need is there, but right here with, 2 exceptions needed. One, especially alarming, again, being within, say, 100 feet or so. I couldn't get the exact distance. I did ask the city for that, and we weren't sure how they measured that. But as you can see, it's pretty much right on top of each other. So, if there's any questions, I can definitely speak to that. But again, in conclusion, I think there's a lot more to be said than, not in my neighborhood type of thing, because I'm operating a CBRF, but I think it's best for the neighborhood, for the community standard to keep really what it was, and is becoming with the single families, the condos, and us trying to build within that the smaller footprint. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Larson.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
What are the impacts of having a concentration of CBRF residents less than 2,500 feet from each other?
A couple of things that I had noted in there were, I think it could lead to some confusion as far as what is offered by different facilities. I mean, we are assisted living and memory care. It could be hidden by one, as we're down lower than that. But just the confusion and the congestion involved there, because this is a narrow road that was extended out just, for our project. And I just think that the concentration of it, isn't good for the neighborhood, could lead to confusion of people that are seeking CBRFs. And I think it would be better to have them spread out as far as business is concerned. I'm not sure what the reason would be to want to build right next to us, having that knowledge already that we were coming in. But I don't think it benefits. I'm talking to the franchise Beehive Homes either. I wanted to, believe me, I asked a lot of questions here, and I wanted to make sure, is this a situation like gas stations on the corner of an interstate where you pile a bunch up and you attract a lot of people? That wasn't the feedback. It's basically, it would be best, to have the milestones already there. We only have not 1, but 2 coming in here already. So that's going to be, I think, still reasonable. But when you add on something more than a 20, more than a 40, but actually a 60, it gets to be a bit much. So sure, I think there'd be a business impact because of confusion and so forth, and just too much in a given area that's not good for it. So the thought was, competition is great, but let's, perhaps look at different areas that might work better for everybody involved.
Thank you.
I don't see any. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move for approval of the rezoning and the CBRF.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? I have one thing I'd like to say if no one else wants to say. I'd be concerned a little bit for the neighborhood and for the condo owners that we're kind of changing the complexion of the neighborhood from being very residential to being a little bit institutional with 2 assisted livings right across the street from each other. That being said, I see some neighborhood representation here. I don't know if any of the condo owners have come, but it may impact the marketability of their properties in the future. No other discussion? Commissioner Radabau.
Yeah, so I worked across the street from there for a long time. I watched the subdivision go up and just kind of sit idle. My first thought when I saw it was worried about the competition with the new project. But at the same time, you know, this is kind of a nice transition from that busy road and the Menards back to the subdivision. So that's kind of, I guess that's kind of my thought. I think it's a nice transition back.
Commissioner Mitchell.
And I agree with Commissioner Radabau. I think it's a good transition, and I think it's actually a better transition than commercial would be.
Commissioner Klinkhammer.
I just want to make sure I amend my motion to include staff recommendation.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Commissioner Larson.
I get a little bit queasy when the rules get changed for a particular development. But on the other hand, I also get queasy when rules are made. You know, sometimes it's hard to tell exactly what caused this, in the case in front of us, the rule that says CBRF should not be closer than 2,500 feet. But in the explanation and really in considering what that rule is, it seems like it's all about protecting each other from competition and making it confusing as to which facility would be better serve their needs. And so I think competition is a good thing, and I'm not sure that I would feel real comfortable. I'm not sure I feel real comfortable stepping in to say, well, this is too close to another one, just because of competition. Competition is good, I think. So I'm going to support it.
Any other discussion? If not, let's call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Me. All right. Next item on the agenda. Public hearing, final action for a conditional use permit for a detached garage at 4810 Rivercrest Drive.
This is the property located off Rivercrest Drive, north of Airport Road. This is the airport, the river, and large lot homes. An aerial photo. Better aerial photo provided by applicant. This actually shows his existing home, the existing detached garage that previously was approved by Plan Commission, and then the proposed location of this then being his second detached garage. And then in your packet are various elevations and floor plans of the garage. The garage is proposed at 48 by 36 foot in size, 22 foot in height. Accessory use standards are 1,000 square feet, 18 feet in height. Anything bigger than that needs to go to Plan Commission, and it's larger than both of those standards. The Plan Commission previously approved a 44 by 56 foot size garage, 22 foot in height, back in '99, and that's that structure right there that just sits on the property. The applicant states the second larger garage is needed for storage of a boat, motorhome, and other personal items. The proposed garage is also within a front yard area, and that setback that's established on this plat basically was done when the area was platted many, many years ago, knowing that everybody would want to build on the back of their lots in order to enjoy that view of the river to the west. And that's why we're seeing garages put out in the front yard area, which is typical when you have a river frontage or lake frontage lot. But it will need, again, a variance from the Board of Appeals for the situation, and it was previously requested and approved for that existing garage on the site. We did put the provisions for review of these requests in your packet. We would note that the second detached garage is only allowed if a lot is more than 1 acre in size, and this lot is 3 acres in size, and it can only be approved by Plan Commission. This house on the property is large. The other lots in this area range from 1.5 acres to 5 acres in size. Plan Commission also approved a detached garage in excess of accessory use standards for the property immediately across the street to the east. We have recommended approval with the condition that a variance needs to be approved by the Board of Appeals.
Any questions for Daryl? I don't see any. Is the applicant here?
My name is Tom Kewan, and that's where I live.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, Daryl did a good job.
Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move approval with staff recommendation.
We have a motion,
I'll second the motion.
and we have a second. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, let's call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next item on the agenda is public hearing for final action, conditional use permit for a daycare center at 836 Richard Drive.
This is the property located on the north side of Richard Drive. There's commercial uses surrounding the site, although it's actually an apartment and then apartments across the road to the south. Aerial photo of this former office, commercial uses, apartment to the south. And the site plan, Richard Drive, access and parking, existing office to be converted to the daycare, and then they'd take the area to the back and fence it for their playground. There's also a narrative provided by applicant explaining this request. They would remodel this existing office building for their daycare facility. It would have a maximum of 99 children. They expect a maximum of 20 staff persons. They operate from 4:45 a.m. to midnight, Monday through Friday. Daycares are reviewed by conditional use permit to allow Plan Commission to judge compatibility. We place the provisions for your review in your report. We would note applicant will need to secure and maintain a child care license from the state of Wisconsin. The facility is again designed with parking immediately to the west, the playground behind the building to the north. They will be fencing that playground area. It's a 26-stall parking lot. They have a maximum of 20 staff persons at site, plus a need for child drop-off, which we believe can be accommodated with that 26-stall parking lot. They'll need to add a 4-stall bike rack. to the site. Street trees exist along the building. For some reason, they removed their foundation plantings, recommending they be added back to the site, and they need a screened dumpster location. We've recommended approval with conditions on securing and maintaining the child care license, adding the bike rack, adding the foundation plantings, and providing a screen enclosure for the dumpster.
Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Thank you. Mr. Tufte, when peak times occur, how is traffic going to get in and out of there through one driveway? Safely?
Safely?
Yeah.
You should ask the applicant if they have peak time, given that hour of operation, because that's a long spread of hour of operations. Maybe they do at 8 in the morning or at 5, but I expect they have a child drop-off situation that's fairly well spread off, given their operations are that long, but that's a good question for applicant. You may have times, though, where you'll have folks that'll have to wait in the parking lot or wait on the street in order to get in and out of the site. But it's hard to judge with daycare facilities, given if everybody suppose if it was an 8 to 5 facility, I'd have more of a concern. But 4:45 in the morning till midnight, I expect they really spread out their drop off and pick up for the kids with that type of a daycare facility. So it's a good question that applicant you might want to ask.
Are there any other questions for Daryl? I don't see any.
Mm-hmm.
Is the applicant here?
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes.
I just
Commissioner
want to add,
Peterson.
that's in my neighborhood, that's a very low-volume street, and I actually use it for back access to Shopko and Gordy's. So I don't think there'll be a lot of traffic in and out on that street that people would be stacked up out on the street.
Come on forward. Pull it forward. There you go.
All right, there we go. Jessica Shuttle, W18414 Chiefin Road, Town of Unity. But yes, okay, so parking. We're actually, the max is only going to be 12 staff there at one time.
Okay.
Just because we have such an expansion of hours. Staff can only work 10-hour maxes per day for DHS standards. So there will be a lot of parking spots open to parents to park. I mean, it's not like a drive-through. They have to park, they have to come in, they have to get their kids, come back out. As far as everything else goes, yeah, the trees will be replanted in the front yard. I don't know why they took them out. Bike racks, not a problem. The fence for the dumpster will be right along that black playground. Is it right here?
Yep.
Ooh, right there. So it'll be right here, big, tall fence for the playground, and the dumpster.
Very good. And you would expect your hours, I see you were planning to serve the medical personnel, so probably first shift, second shift, third shift.
Exactly.
As well as the 8 to 5 people. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Brunholt.
Just a comment, I want to commend you for the hours of operation. As a former parent who had to drop kids off at daycare, that provides an awful lot of flexibility.
Thank you.
That's great.
We try.
Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Maybe I'm just unobservant, but do you anticipate any difficulty getting traffic in and out of there when there are a fair number of people dropping off their children?
I don't. That's not something that I see being an issue with this large of a parking lot.
Well, where do they turn around and get back out?
Well, actually, it does make kind of a loop. So, I mean, if they were to come in, we could put arrows down, I guess, if need be. But right, I mean, they basically can come in, park, and we could have something that went around like that to make it a little bit easier. But I don't see it being a major issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'll be looking for a motion. Commissioner Brunholt.
I'll move approval with staff recommendations.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda. Conditional use permit projecting signs for 503 Galloway Street.
Ice cream time. Ramon's Ice Cream Parlor at 503 Galloway Street has submitted a conditional use for these two projecting signs. One is on the corner of he's on the corner of Farwell and Galloway. One faces Galloway and one faces Farwell. The reason why it's before you, as you can see in the front here, there is no windows on Farwell, but in the front, they are above the second floor windowsill, as noted here. The building contains the ice cream parlor shop on the first floor and one apartment on the second floor. This property is within the downtown district. It's centrally business zoned. These signs were installed on prior to May 19th without sign permits. This diagram shows the sizes. They're approximately 6 square feet, and they are a clearance of the sidewalk about 16 feet. So nobody can jump up and touch them. The minimum in the sign ordinance is 8 feet. Projecting signs are allowed in the downtown as well as Water Street. The highest point of the sign, projecting sign, shall not be above the windowsill, as noted in this picture. The sign code also states that the Plan Commission may approve a conditional use permit in relation to that sign if the commission feels that the sign is not adequate due to the unique characteristics of the building, such as its scale, design, or height. Projecting signs are typically for pedestrians only, but also traffic would be able to view those. Also, typically there are at the front doors, so then people know where to enter them. Our design standards have been through the North Barstow Street Design, which is noted in your packet, and also the American Planning Association also discussed projecting signs. The Plan Commission did approve one projecting sign above the second floor windowsill last year at the 324 Water Street, which is the Brothers Bar and Grill. That sign was a little taller and skinnier. It was up to 20 square feet. In addition, the building design was a little different. So the Plan Commission before you will have to just determine that this conditional use permit and the projecting signs are adequate and due to the unique characteristic of the building, either the scale, design, or the height. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Ryan? Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. Are these really signs, or are these pieces of artwork?
Combination. They are selling a product, an ice cream cone, inside their store. So they're a combination, but there is no, they don't have a name on them per se. And no lettering.
So how is this different than a picture of Mona Lisa on the side of a building?
That is a good question.
We've determined that they're a sign. That bill can be appealed to a Board of Appeals, which has overturned that determination on other things in this community. But our determination is that's a sign. And we're now here before a Plan Commission to say, can they be above the windowsill? So.
Are there any other questions for Ryan? I have one. Oh, Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. Ryan, now I forgot my question. Would you, oh, you threw me off with that.
It's getting pretty late.
I forgot my name and now I forgot the question. I guess one thing I was, yeah, it's been a long night. One thing I was thinking about with this, what is the philosophy of not having a projecting sign near the second floor windows? I mean, what is the AMA? Are you getting direction from them? Or where does that come from?
It's a combination of things that we've factored into the sign code. I got an example of the Brothers sign. You can kind of tell the difference. This second floor windowsill is significantly lower. The front door is here. And you can see the awning's in the way too, but the second floor window is significantly lower. Here on this building, the second floor window, there's probably a good 4 to 5 feet in between where they could have lowered the sign. Now, granted, the signs are installed, so I believe it's a combination of factors.
I remembered my original question.
Oh.
So the issue here isn't necessarily that they didn't pull a permit for the signage?
No, it's just the overall height of the sign.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Larson.
Thank you. Have there been any objections raised by other businesses in the area?
Not that we're aware of.
Commissioner Peterson.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I drive Farwell Street twice a week, and I have learned to use Galloway Street. So I go past here. Today, after looking at these, that's the first time I ever noticed those. So I don't think they're doing their job for the car driver. I'm certainly looking at the street, but I think if they were down, you know, at the proper level, people would see them a little bit better.
Any Commissioner Larson?
I just want to say I noticed them.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here?
Blaine Midtune, 1372 McKinley Road, Town of Seymour.
Anything you'd like to add on your
Yeah,
ideas?
well,
on-
I guess through talking with Ryan in the past when we were talking about having the signs put up, the height that he was talking about, he was saying 4 to 5. I don't think it's quite that much that he's saying. I think it's more of a 3 foot, if not less. The other thing too, that when you look at the picture, the traffic light at the corner and then the street light on the side of the building, we want to get up above those so they are more visible to that car traffic. Also the size of the signs and just aesthetically on the building, we felt that they needed to be higher and then in proportion with the front facade, the block that comes up along the front, and then the black stripe, which is kind of centering everything. So to bring these signs down anymore, the sign would have had to shrunk considerably. And then they really wouldn't be doing their job.
Very good. Any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to make a comment about this topic? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I don't see any, so we'll close the public hearing. I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I have a comment, but I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Larson.
I just want to say that I think Commissioner Mitchell brought up an interesting question about whether it's a sign or especially with the comparison with Mona Lisa's. But I think the easier way to resolve this is just to approve the conditional use at this level. I don't see a problem with those really. I think I would have supported the conditional use if they felt strongly about having them up that high had they come before they put the signs up. But I do think it's important to point out that it is important to work with the city, you know, before you put the sign up, so we're not playing catch up later on. It's just a bad precedent for us. So.
Are there any other comments? Commissioner Peterson.
I'm going to be voting against this. I think there are unique circumstances on Water Street with that building and that sign because of the design of the building. Here I feel the building is a plain old box building, and just like this applicant was citing that sign on Water Street, the next applicant for a conditional use permit can now cite the sign on Water Street and these signs. So I'm going to be voting against it.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have one. I drove by the building on my way to Planning Commission tonight, and I realized that when you're when you're on Galloway Street, if you are coming, you'd be going east on Galloway Street. If the sign was any lower in the front, the stoplight blocks it out. And if you're coming from the east on Farwell Street heading towards the building, having it higher is better as a vantage point when you're on the bridge to see exactly where the building is. Now, I think most people already know where the building is, but nonetheless, I don't have a problem with the sign in its current location, and I tend to agree with Kathy that it's as much a piece of art as it is a sign. So I will be supporting it. Any other comments before I call the question? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the conditional use? Aye. All opposed? Aye. Okay, motion carries. All right, next item on our agenda, before we completely lose our is a site plan for an 8-unit apartment at 2421 Session Street.
This is the property located on the south side of Session Street, and it's within an area of many other multifamily units. And that's the site plan with site access to a rear parking area that includes 8 detached garages and then the 8-plex to the front. And that is the elevations of the buildings. This is the front elevation that would face the street. The required parking for this building is only 8 stalls since it's 8 one-bedroom units. They do provide 3 additional parallel parking stalls next to the building. They do show front foundation plantings and street trees. Those will need city attorney review. They have a trash enclosure. The building elevation does show front-facing doors and windows and meets our multifamily housing design manual. They have a partial masonry finish also with the building. They need some lighting on the building, and we'll cover that with code. They probably put wall mounts on the back of the building, and that'll provide ample parking for the situation. Site grading and drainage and other city services are also reviewed in a report. We provide a letter that recommends approval with conditions needing city engineer approval of drainage, and that exterior lighting meets city standards. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Daryl? Commissioner Peterson?
Is there any bike parking requirement?
No, since they have garage parking by ordinance, they then are exempt because they can put their bikes in their garage.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Daryl? I don't see any. Would the applicant like to come forward?
I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Matt Apple, 3510 Powell Drive.
Are there any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll move for approval with staff recommendation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, the last thing, nope, almost coming to the last thing. For approval, site plan, Baymont Hotel and Suites, 4075 Commonwealth Avenue.
This is an aerial photo then showing, again, the existing Baymont Hotel on the property of a Commonwealth Avenue, right across from Best Buy. What has been added to the aerial then is a proposed lot on the property and a preliminary site plan laying out a building with parking for the building to the front and to the south. Also within your packet is the certified survey map that shows the proposed lot split for the hotel, and then that lot with that preliminary site plan for the property. And then finally in the packet is the site plan that Plan Commission considered at a previous meeting, and the vote to approve that site plan for a parking lot on the east side of the hotel failed on a 4-4 vote. The purpose of the parking on the east side of the hotel is to allow them to split off the lot on the west side of the hotel, and they're now showing you a preliminary site plan as to what they intend to do with the property. We also attached the original staff report for this project, and we attached an email that we received from Mr. Larson, who's here this evening and believes he can convince you to vote differently on this project. Applicant notes that the reason for the parking lot expansion for the existing hotel is to allow the sale of Lot 2 for a future business. An applicant explains the reasons for that parking expansion now and not with the future business planned on Lot 2 in that attached email. I'll let Mr. Larson expound upon that as part of his presentation. We would recommend approval of the site plan with the conditions that we noted in the original staff report, and those are in your packet. And one other option that the Plan Commission could consider is simply then adding one more condition to that, which simply states provide for staff approval a revised site plan that shows the removal of that parking. In other words, you take out all this parking and just put it into lawn until, with the construction of this parking lot, until such time that this project is ready to get site plan approval. And I think Mr. Peterson suggested that condition at the last meeting. So that's a second option, that you could add that if you wanted to as another way of dealing with this situation. That I'd answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Daryl? Commissioner Peterson?
Would another option be to allow them to build this parking lot and not use it till they sell off the other piece of property? To block it off?
That'd be tough to enforce, I think, a not use clause. I think it'd be better to remove in my mind, or just let it be built and they park where they park.
Any other questions for Daryl? I don't see any. Thank you. Would the applicant like to come forward? Thank you for being very patient tonight.
Long night for you, all of you folks. I'm Dean Larson, Acquisition Realty and Development, 3610 Elkwood Hills Parkway. I apologize, first of all, for having to have you deal with this issue again. The last time I absolutely was unable to attend, and Cedar Corp failed to discuss it in more detail. Basically, I started working with the hotel operator a number of months ago, and we came up with this idea of developing an outlot consisting of approximately 25,000 square feet, which is a little over a half-acre of land. I've talked to a cellular company. I've talked to a mattress company. I talked to a women's boutique. All those range 4,500 to 5,000 square feet. I also did talk with a little coffee shop that had a little breakfast and lunch menu that would consist of about 2,000 square feet. I believe, in my humble opinion, that it'll most likely be a small little retail facility. The owner of the hotel is in negotiations to sell the hotel. He has an obligation to disclose to the buyer that we are going to potentially do this outlot. The future hotel buyer says this will disrupt my operation. We're going to end up excavating the entire east side of that hotel, installing stormwater systems, underground electrical, concrete, blacktop, parking lot lights. That takes time to do that. And he's saying it'll disrupt his business, hurt his business long term. And so the owner, the current owner, is saying, Dean, I would like to have you build a parking lot, get it designed, get it done, work through the staff and engineering to make sure it's done properly, and then pay me for the outlot, and then I can potentially sell my hotel. And so that is one of the key issues. The second issue is just timing. If someone came along in October and said, we like it, we'd like you to build our little clothing store. If I have to come back and explain to them, well, I don't have staff approval, I don't have planning commission approval, I need to go back and say I need to create this lot. It is Maurice's, and they want to have it, and here's now the final site plan. We then start construction. If it's late in the winter, we can actually build over the winter, but we won't be able to build a parking lot until the blacktop companies are open at roughly the middle end of May. And that logistically causes problems. So that's why we're not trying to put the cart before the horse. It's really just logistics. One, with him wanting to sell the hotel. B, timing for any future tenant. That's my story.
Questions for the applicant? Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Mr. Larson, would you have issues with the proposed statement that you'd provide for staff approval of the revised site plan that shows the removal of the parking lot on Lot 2 of the certified survey map with the construction of the new parking lot?
I personally would have no problem with it. I did send an email to Dax, the current owner of the hotel, and he had been out of town. He has not responded to me. But I did make it aware to him that that could be a condition. Okay. And he has not responded to me. So I personally don't have a problem with it.
Thank you.
That would seem to solve most of your timing problem.
I concur.
I have a couple questions. Is there an access from the back side of that hotel where the new parking lot would be for people to enter?
Yes.
There is, okay. Okay, that's good. And does that land have to be raised quite a bit? You have to bring a lot of fill in to do a parking lot? Because I know it slopes off towards the highway.
It slopes off toward the highway. There will be some grading that'll have to be done.
Okay.
And we'll have to connect with, most likely, the stormwater that we own the Joanne Fabrics, Boot Barn, Asia Palace facility next door.
Okay.
So we'll have to tie in with that
Okay.
to send it over to the regional pond.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone?
Madam Chair, I have a question
Yes.
for Darrell. Mr. Tufty.
Thank you.
We included that statement. Explain what that does.
It basically means that this hotel won't be sitting for a number of years with a lot of parking. It means that when they build this new parking lot, shortly thereafter, they have to remove that extra parking lot and just put that into grass. Now, what could happen is they could get a project in the interim and there won't be that, but it basically doesn't allow that to happen for a long period of time if something doesn't come along.
Thank you.
Okay, open it to the public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to comment on this issue? Is there anyone who'd like to comment on this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll move for approval the way it is. I voted for it the first time. I'm sorry, I'll just make the motion. I'm not going to debate it.
Okay, the motion is made. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Is that with staff recommendations?
The original staff recommendations, yes. Not necessarily with that statement. But if it meant getting
Dr. Terry.
5 votes, I'd be open to an amendment.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Then I move to amend the motion to include the other condition that they provide for staff approval of a revised site plan, blah, blah.
I'll
Right.
accept that as a friendly.
Okay.
It's a second.
And does our seconder
I'll
approve?
second that.
Okay, we have a motion with an amendment and a second. Does this require 2 votes or 1 vote since he? Okay, so it's only one thing. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, on to our last items, which are code compliance items. Anybody have anything? I do. There's a house at, I think it's 1022 Eddy Street, that faces the Mount Simon ball fields. And I don't know what happened, but I'm pretty sure they haven't mowed the grass at all this summer, and there's so much trash all over the yard, and collapsed tents, and I mean, just all kinds of weird stuff. And it's really turning into kind of an eyesore and difficult to pass. That's the only thing I saw. Anybody else have anything? All right, future agenda items? Yes.
The discussion of the Fleet Farm tonight and the parking leads me to ask about parking, our parking ordinance in general as it applies to commercial properties. It seems to me that we have more parking than we need sometimes, the mall being a good example. Have we looked at that recently, or are we going to look at that?
Retail parking, we probably haven't looked at for a while. However, there is a provision in there for retailers that sell large items like furniture. They actually have a requirement of half of what a normal retailer is required. And you probably would go into a Fleet Farm and find out they probably got some of that big stuff in there, and we could have probably just administratively interpreted it because of some of the big stuff in there. They don't really need all that. Parking is another way to look at it, but it is an interesting topic that we probably could review sometime in the future.
Well, maybe you just put it on the list.
Okay, I'll put it on the list.
All right. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Then you have effectively approved the minutes from the last meeting, and I consider the meeting to be adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.